The day I discovered my retirement account held less than $7,000 was the day I finally understood what it means to be truly betrayed. I'd spent 26 years as the financial cornerstone of my brother's family, and at 58, all I had to show for it was an empty savings account and a future filled with uncertainty. It started with a simple request, as these things often do. "James, we need $10,000 for Matthew's first semester at Cornell," my brother Andrew said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of entitlement masked as casual conversation. The financial aid package wasn't as generous as we expected. I stared at the statement from my financial advisor, the numbers blurring as I tried to make sense of the cold reality before me. 26 years of transfers, loans that were never repaid, investments in Andrew's perpetually failing business ventures. All of it documented in neat columns that told the story of my own financial demise. "I can't, Andrew," I said, the words foreign in my mouth. In nearly 3 decades, I'd never refused him anything. "What do you mean, you can't?" Confusion colored his voice. The concept of me saying no was so alien he couldn't process it. "It's Cornell. It's Matthew's future. Your nephew's future." I closed my eyes, remembering Matthew's lavish 18th birthday party 6 months earlier. The catered affair at Andrew's sprawling Tudor home in Westchester County. The brand new BMW sitting in the driveway with a giant red bow, a gift from his parents who somehow never had enough money to repay the loans they'd been taking from me since Matthew was in diapers. "I mean, I can't, Andrew. I've given you everything I have." The silence stretched between us, two brothers connected by blood and divided by money, or rather, by my brother's assumption that my money was essentially his. "This is a joke, right?" Andrew finally said. "Because it isn't funny. Matthew's orientation is in 6 weeks. I have less than $7,000 in my retirement account," I said, the admission burning like acid in my throat. "I'm 58 years old, and I have nothing saved for my future because I've spent the last 26 years financing yours." Another pause, this one heavier than the last. "That's not fair, James. We've had some financial setbacks. You know that, and it's not like you have a family to support. It's just you. Just you." 2 words that summarized how they viewed me as a singular entity, without needs or dreams of my own, existing solely to support their ambitions. "I've been running the numbers," I continued, ignoring the familiar sting of his dismissal. "Do you know how much money I've given you since Matthew was born?" "Given? You make it sound like charity." "We're family. It's what family does." $372,000, Andrew. That's what I've given you over the years. Enough for a house in most parts of the country. Enough for a comfortable retirement. Enough to have changed the entire trajectory of my life. "You're being dramatic," Andrew scoffed. "It hasn't been that much. I have bank statements going back to 1998, I said quietly. "Every transfer, every check, every cash withdrawal that mysteriously coincided with one of your emergencies. I've documented all of it." The silence that followed told me he was finally beginning to understand the gravity of the situation. "Look, if you're having some kind of midlife crisis, I'm not having a crisis, Andrew. I'm having a reckoning. And it's about 26 years overdue." I ended the call before he could respond, my hands shaking as I set down the phone. For the first time in my adult life, I'd said no to my brother. The world hadn't ended. The sky hadn't fallen. But something fundamental had shifted in the universe of our relationship, and we both knew it would never be the same. The calls started within the hour. First Andrew, then his wife Claire, then even Matthew himself, his young voice carefully coached to hit just the right notes of disappointment and confusion. "Uncle James, I don't understand. You've always supported my education. You're the one who told me to aim high, to never settle." I closed my eyes, picturing my nephew a good kid at his core, but raised in an environment of entitlement that had skewed his perception of how the world worked. "I still believe in aiming high, Matthew," I said gently. "But I also believe in standing on your own 2 feet. There are scholarships, loans, work-study programs, many paths to Cornell that don't involve draining your uncle's retirement account. But Dad said you're just being difficult because of some argument you had." Of course, that's what Andrew had told him. Easier than admitting the truth that they'd been treating me like their personal ATM for his entire life. "This isn't about an argument, Matthew. This is about me finally recognizing that I've enabled a situation that isn't healthy for any of us. Your parents make good money, more than enough to live comfortably and save for your education. They've chosen not to do that, and I've chosen to subsidize those decisions. That stops now." The silence on the other end told me he'd never considered this perspective before. "So you're just cutting us off, just like that?" I'm setting a boundary that should have been set decades ago, I corrected him. There's a difference. After Matthew, the next call came from my sister-in-law Claire, her normally carefully modulated voice tight with barely controlled anger. How could you do this to us? She demanded. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. What exactly have you done for me, Claire? We've included you, made you part of our family. You've spent every holiday with us for 20 years. You're Matthew's godfather, for God's sake. I'm family when you need money, I said quietly, but not when it comes to respect, or consideration, or being treated as an equal partner in our relationship. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. When was the last time you asked about my dreams, Claire? My plans for retirement. My concerns about growing older without the financial security I've spent decades helping you build. Her silence was answer enough. I thought so, I said. I've been a checkbook to you, not a brother-in-law. And I'm done. The barrage continued throughout the evening. Text messages from Andrew warning that I would regret this decision. Voicemails from Claire detailing the devastating impact my selfishness would have on Matthew's future. Even an email from my mother, clearly orchestrated by Andrew, expressing her disappointment in my unwillingness to support family during difficult times. I turned off my phone at midnight, exhausted by the emotional warfare but strangely calm in my resolve. For the first time in decades, I fell asleep without the weight of my brother's financial needs pressing on my chest like a stone. The next morning, I woke to sunshine streaming through my bedroom window, illuminating the modest apartment I'd been renting for 15 years. I could have owned a home by now, had actually been in the process of buying one back in 2003 when Andrew's business faced its first temporary cash flow problem that required a $40,000 loan from me. The home purchase had been indefinitely deferred, the loan never repaid. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, turning my phone back on with a sense of trepidation. -1 missed calls, 27 text messages, 9 voicemails, all from Andrew, Claire, or their proxies in this emotional ambush. Instead of listening to the messages, I opened my laptop and navigated to my bank's website. For the first time in 26 years, I wouldn't be making a transfer to Andrew's account on the first of the month. The sense of liberation was dizzying. With steady hands, I created a new recurring transfer, this one to a personal retirement account I'd neglected for decades. Only $500 a month, a fraction of what I'd been sending Andrew, but it was a start. A declaration of independence. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. Andrew again. This time, I answered. I've been calling you all night, he said without preamble. Mom is upset. Claire is upset. Matthew is devastated. Good morning to you too, Andrew. This isn't a joke, James. This is serious. Matthew's future is at stake. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. Matthew has many options for his future. Cornell with loans, a state school with scholarships, a gap year to work and save money. His future isn't at stake. His particular vision of his future might be, but that's different. I can't believe what I'm hearing, Andrew said, his voice rising. My own brother, turning his back on family when we need him most. I haven't turned my back on anyone, I said calmly. I've simply stopped setting myself on fire to keep you warm. Melodramatic much. We're talking about helping your nephew attend an Ivy League school, not some life or death situation. We're talking about my retirement, Andrew. My ability to live with dignity after I can no longer work. That is a life or death situation for me. He scoffed. You're 58, not 80. You have plenty of time to save. Do I? The average retirement account for someone my age should have close to $1 million. I have less than 7,000. Even if I max out my contributions for the next 10 years, which I can't afford to do, I'll never catch up. So this is my fault? You're blaming me for your poor financial planning. I set down my coffee mug carefully. My financial planning consisted entirely of responding to your emergencies, your business failures, your lifestyle choices, your unwillingness to live within your means. That's not fair. It's entirely fair. And it's over. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, processing the finality in my tone. What if we work out a payment plan? He finally said. We could start repaying some of the money after Matthew graduates. I finished for him. After he finished grad school. After Claire remodels the kitchen again. There's always something, Andrew. Always a reason why you need my money more than I do. So that's it. 26 years of me being there for you, and you're just cutting me off. The audacity of his statement momentarily robbed me of speech. 26 years of him being there for me. In what universe? I think we're done with this conversation, I said when I could trust myself to speak calmly. I wish Matthew the best with Cornell, I truly do, but I won't be financing it. I ended the call and blocked his number, then did the same for Claire. It was a temporary measure. I'd unblock them eventually, but for now, I needed space to breathe, to think, to begin rebuilding the life I'd sacrificed at the altar of my brother's ambitions. The weeks that followed were both harder and easier than I'd anticipated. Harder because the emotional assault continued through other channels: emails from extended family members who'd heard Andrew's version of events, a tear-filled phone call from my mother, even a letter from Claire's father expressing his grave concern about my mental state. Easier because each day without the weight of Andrew's financial demands felt like another step toward freedom. I met with a financial advisor who didn't sugarcoat my situation. I won't lie to you, Mr. Mercer. Starting serious retirement planning at 58 is far from ideal. You have significant catching up to do. I nodded, accepting the reality without flinching. What are my options? Work longer, save aggressively, consider downsizing further, she said, reviewing my financial documents. You're fortunate that you don't have significant debt. That gives us something to work with. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't have debt because I'd spent decades living modestly, well below my means as a software development manager, not for my own benefit, but to have extra money available when Andrew inevitably called. I'm prepared to make significant changes, I told her, whatever it takes. She looked at me curiously. If you don't mind my asking, how did you end up in this position? Your income history suggests you should have substantial savings by now. Family obligations, I said simply. She nodded, a flash of recognition in her eyes. I see that more often than you might think. Well, let's create a plan that puts you first from now on. First, the concept was so foreign it almost made me uncomfortable. For 26 years, I've been second or third, or fourth in the hierarchy of my own financial priorities. Andrew's needs, Claire's wants, Matthew's future, all had taken precedence over my own security. The plan we developed was aggressive but realistic, maximizing my company's 401k match, cutting expenses further, taking on consulting work on the weekends, possibly working until 70 instead of the 65 I'd once dreamed of. It won't be easy, my advisor warned, but it's doable. You can still create a decent retirement for yourself. Decent. Not comfortable, not secure, just decent. But decent was better than destitute, which had been the trajectory I was on. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Uncle James, it's Matthew. Can we meet? Just the two of us? Please. I hesitated, then responded. Saturday, 2 p.m., the coffee shop on Elm Street. Whatever Andrew and Claire might have orchestrated, I owed my nephew at least one conversation. Matthew was waiting when I arrived, looking younger than his 18 years, in jeans and a Cornell sweatshirt that seemed more aspirational than celebratory now. He stood as I approached, an unexpected formality that reminded me he was on the cusp of adulthood, navigating the murky waters between boy and man. Uncle James, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for meeting me. We sat across from each other, the small table between us laden with more than just coffee cups. How are you, Matthew? I asked, genuinely wanting to know. Whatever issues I had with his parents, they weren't his fault. Confused, he admitted. Mom and Dad won't really explain what's happening. They just say you're going through something and taking it out on the family. I nodded, unsurprised. That's one interpretation of events. What's yours? I studied him, trying to gauge whether this was a genuine question or if he'd been sent as an emotional ambassador to manipulate me back into compliance. My interpretation is that I've spent 26 years subsidizing your parents' lifestyle at the expense of my own financial security. And I've recently realized I can't continue to do that if I want to have any kind of stable future. He frowned, processing this. Dad says you've always helped with family expenses because you don't have your own family to support. I don't have a wife or children, I corrected him, but I am a family, my own family. And I have needs and responsibilities to myself that I've neglected for decades. So you're not going to help with Cornell? He asked, cutting to the chase. I can't help with Cornell, I said gently. Not financially. I wish I could, but I literally don't have the money. Your parents have known about Cornell as a possibility for years. They had time to plan, to save. They chose not to, assuming I would cover the gap as I've always done. He looked down at his coffee, shoulders slumping slightly. I don't know what to do. The state school's deadlines have passed. Community college feels like failure. There's no failure in being financially responsible, I said. Only in living beyond your means at someone else's expense. His head snapped up, eyes widening. I didn't mean, I'm not accusing you, I assured him. You're 18. This situation isn't your creation, but it is an opportunity for you to learn something valuable about financial independence that your parents never have. What should I do? He asked, and for the first time, I heard a genuine request for guidance rather than a plea for money. If Cornell is where you want to be, look into student loans. Apply for last-minute scholarships, there are still some available. Consider deferring for a year and working to save money. Talk to the financial aid office about work-study options. He nodded slowly. Dad says debt is something to be avoided at all costs. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. Your father has been avoiding debt by transferring it to me for your entire life. There's good debt and bad debt, Matthew. Student loans for a quality education that increases your earning potential can be good debt, if managed responsibly. We talked for another hour, about college options, about financial literacy, about the hard choices that come with adulthood. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. He was seeing me not just as the uncle who could be counted on for financial bailouts, but as a person with his own concerns and wisdom to share. Thank you, he said as we stood to leave, for being honest with me. No one else is right now. You deserve the truth, I said simply. You're an adult now, or nearly. It's time people treated you like one. He hugged me then, a brief, awkward embrace that nonetheless held genuine affection. I'll let you know what I decide about school. As I watched him walk away, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride in his maturity, sadness for the position he'd been put in, anger at Andrew and Claire for their continued manipulation, and a small, quiet hope that perhaps one member of their household might learn from this situation rather than simply resenting me for it. Summer stretched into fall, and with it came changes I hadn't anticipated. Matthew deferred his Cornell acceptance for a year and took a job at a local tech company, saving money and gaining experience that would serve him well regardless of where he eventually attended college. Andrew and Claire, after several months of escalating emotional warfare including a particularly nasty email campaign to extended family members portraying me as mentally unstable, finally seemed to accept that I wouldn't be changing my mind. The aggressive communication slowed, then stopped entirely, replaced by a cold silence that was both painful and peaceful. My mother, after initially siding with Andrew, began to ask questions that suggested she was seeing the situation more clearly. Have they really been taking that much money from you all these years? She asked during one of our weekly phone calls. Andrew told me it was just occasional help. I have the records, Mom, I said. Every transfer, every loan. Nearly $400,000 over 26 years. Her sharp intake of breath told me she hadn't known the extent of it. But why? They have good jobs. That beautiful house they couldn't actually afford, I said. The private schools for Matthew they couldn't actually afford. The vacations, the cars, the lifestyle, none of it was within their means. It was within my means, and they helped themselves to it. Oh, James, she sighed. I had no idea. You should have said something. Would you have believed me? I asked gently. Or would you have told me that Andrew needed more help than I did, that my job as his brother was to support him? Her silence was answer enough. For as long as I could remember, Andrew had been the golden child, more charming, more social, more needy. I had been the reliable one, the steady one, the one who didn't require attention because I handled my own problems. Except I hadn't been handling my own problems, had I? I'd been handling everyone else's while neglecting the looming crisis of my own financial future. By December, my aggressive saving plan was showing modest results. My retirement account had grown from the pitiful $6,800 to just over $15,000, still desperately inadequate for a man my age, but moving in the right direction. I'd taken on weekend consulting work that supplemented my income by about $1,500 a month, all of which went straight into savings. My apartment, always modest, had become more Spartan as I eliminated every unnecessary expense. Cable TV, gone. Dining out, a rare luxury rather than a regular occurrence. New clothes, only when absolutely necessary. Every dollar saved was another step toward the security I should have established decades ago. It wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself in my late 50s, but it was a life I was building with intention rather than having it dictated by the constant drain of my brother's financial demands. The holidays approached with a peculiar mixture of dread and liberation. For the first time in 20 years, I wouldn't be spending Christmas at Andrew and Claire's house, And during their lavish celebration, while silently calculating how many months of my salary had funded the extravaganza, my mother, caught in the middle of our estrangement, had decided to spend Christmas Eve with Andrew's family and Christmas Day with me, a compromise that satisfied no one but seemed the best solution to an impossible situation. On December 23rd, as I was leaving work for the holiday weekend, I received a text from Matthew. "Can I stop by tomorrow morning? Have something I want to talk to you about." I replied with my address and a time, curious about what my nephew wanted to discuss. We'd maintained sporadic contact over the months since our coffee shop conversation, mostly brief texts about his job and occasional questions about financial matters. He seemed to be finding his footing in the adult world, navigating it with more maturity than his parents had shown in their decades of financial dependence. Matthew arrived promptly at 10 a.m. on Christmas Eve, a wrapped package under his arm and an expression of nervous determination on his face. "Uncle James," he said as I opened the door. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Matthew. Come in." He followed me into my small living room, glancing around at the minimal holiday decorations, a small artificial tree on the coffee table, a string of lights along the window. After years of enduring Andrew and Claire's magazine-worthy holiday displays which I'd helped finance, the simplicity was a statement in itself. "Nice place," he said, though we both knew it wasn't. It was functional, clean, and affordable, the home of a man who had spent his adult life directing his resources elsewhere. "It serves its purpose," I said, gesturing for him to sit. "How are you? How's the job?" "Good. Really good, actually." His face brightened. "I got promoted last month. Junior developer now instead of just tech support." "That's excellent," I said, genuinely pleased. "You're putting that coding camp from last summer to good use." He nodded. "And they're going to help with tuition when I start classes next fall. They have an education assistance program for employees." "Smart move," I said. "Building skills and experience before college will make you a more attractive candidate for internships later." "That's what my boss said." He hesitated, then thrust the wrapped package toward me. "This is for you. It's not much, but—" I took it, surprised by its weight. "You didn't need to bring anything." "I wanted to," he insisted. "Please, open it." I unwrapped the package carefully to find a leather-bound ledger book, its cover embossed with my initials. Opening it, I discovered it was a financial planning journal, with sections for tracking expenses, setting goals, and mapping out long-term financial strategies. "I noticed you keep all your records in those manila folders," Matthew explained. "Thought this might be more organized. There's an app that goes with it too, for digital tracking." The thoughtfulness of the gift caught me off guard. Not just that he'd noticed my filing system, but that he'd chosen something practical, something aligned with my current priorities rather than a generic gift. "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched. "This is perfect." "There's something else," he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out an envelope. "This is the real reason I wanted to see you." I opened the envelope to find a check for $3,000 made out to me. "Matthew, what is this?" "It's the first payment," he said, his expression serious, "for all the money you've given our family. I know it's just a drop in the bucket compared to what my parents have taken from you, but it's a start." I stared at the check, then at my nephew, speechless. "I've been saving from my paychecks," he continued. "Living at home helps no rent, though Mama and Dad aren't exactly thrilled that I'm sending money to you instead of contributing to household expenses." "Matthew, I can't accept this," I said, finding my voice. "This isn't your debt to repay." "It is," he insisted. "Maybe not legally, but morally. When you showed me the reality of our family's financial situation, when you explained what had been happening all these years, I can't just pretend that didn't affect me. My education, my lifestyle, everything was subsidized by you. Without your knowledge or real consent. You were a child," I reminded him. "None of this was your decision." "I'm not a child anymore," he said firmly. "And I'm making a decision now. I want to repay what I can. It won't be fast, and it won't be everything, but it will be something." I looked at the young man sitting across from me, seeing in him a strength of character and sense of responsibility that his parents had never developed. "I'm proud of you," I said finally. "Not for this," I held up the check, "but for understanding the principle behind it. For recognizing that financial responsibility is part of being an adult." "I learned that from you," he said simply. "When you finally said no to my parents, it forced me to look at our family differently, to see the patterns I'd always taken for granted." We talked for another hour, about his job, his plans for college, the strained atmosphere at home where Andrew and Claire were finally facing the reality of living within their actual means. Matthew described the fights about money, the blame they placed on me for their sudden financial hardship, their resistance to making the necessary changes to their lifestyle. They still don't get it, he said, shaking his head. Dad leased a new car last month. Mom's talking about renovating the master bathroom in the spring. It's like they're waiting for you to give in and start sending money again. That's not going to happen, I said. I know. He smiled slightly. That's why I got a job. I knew the bank of Uncle James was permanently closed. When he left, I sat holding his check, turning it over in my hands and considering what it represented. Not just money, though. Every dollar helped in my uphill battle to build retirement security, but a fundamental shift in the values being passed to the next generation of our family. Andrew had learned from our parents that financial irresponsibility would be rewarded with bailouts. He taught that same lesson to Claire during their marriage. They tried to instill the same entitlement in Matthew, but something had broken in that chain of dysfunction. Matthew was choosing a different path, one of accountability, of living within his means, of making amends for what had been taken without his knowledge but for his benefit. I placed the check in my new ledger book, in the section marked income, and wrote next to it, Matthew Mercer, first repayment. Not because I expected or required him to continue, but because I wanted to document this moment of grace in our family's financial history. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that something positive might emerge from the painful rupture with my brother, a nephew who understood the value of financial integrity in a way his parents never had. Spring brought unexpected developments. Matthew continued his monthly payments, smaller now at $500 since he'd moved into his own apartment near his workplace. Andrew, after months of silence, reached out with a terse email requesting a meeting to discuss family matters. I agreed to meet at a neutral location, a park near my office, where we'd played as children decades earlier. Andrew was waiting when I arrived, looking older and more careworn than when I'd last seen him 9 months before. James, he said, rising from the bench. Thank you for coming. You said it was important, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. We sat side by side, watching a group of children playing on the swings where we had once taken turns pushing each other higher and higher, our father watching from this very bench. Claire and I are getting divorced, he said without preamble. The statement caught me off guard. Despite their flaws, I'd always thought their marriage solid, united at least in their shared belief that the world and particularly owed them the lifestyle they desired. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and meant it. Whatever my issues with their financial exploitation, divorce was painful, messy, destructive. Are you? He asked, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. It's partly your fault, after all. I turned to look at him directly. How exactly is your divorce my responsibility? When you cut us off financially, it exposed all the cracks in our marriage, he said. All the things we'd been papering over with your money for years. Without that safety net, we've been forced to face reality, and the reality is that Claire and I want very different things. And that's my fault? I asked incredulously. He sighed, deflating slightly. No, it's not. That's not fair. The truth is, our marriage has been in trouble for years. We just never had to deal with it because there was always another distraction, a renovation, a vacation, a financial crisis that you would solve. When that stopped, we had to actually look at each other and what we'd built together. And it wasn't much. I sat with that admission, surprised by his self-awareness after months of blaming me for every consequence of his own financial irresponsibility. I'm still sorry, I said. Divorce is hard, no matter the circumstances. He nodded, staring at his hands. Matthew says you've been talking regularly. That he's been giving you money. He has, I confirmed. Against my initial objections, I might add. It was his idea. That sounds like him, Andrew said with a small smile. Always had a strong sense of justice, even as a kid. Remember how he used to make us replay board games if he thought someone was cheating, even if he was winning? I remember, I said, surprised by the sudden warmth of shared memory after months of cold resentment. He told me how much money we've taken from you over the years, Andrew continued, his voice quieter now. The actual total. I didn't believe him at first. Told him he must have misunderstood. So he showed me his spreadsheet because of course Matthew would make a spreadsheet. Despite everything, I smiled. Of course he would. $372,000, Andrew said, the number hanging in the air between us. I knew it was a lot. I didn't realize it was that much. It adds up over time, I said simply. James, he turned to face me fully. I've been angry at you for months, blaming you for our financial problems, for the stress in my marriage, for Matthew deferring Cornell. But the truth is, I've been angry because you forced me to see something about myself that I've been avoiding for decades. I'm financially irresponsible. I always have been. The admission stunned me. In 30 years of financial bailouts, Andrew had never once acknowledged this fundamental truth about himself. When Dad died, he continued, he left us both the same amount of money. You invested yours carefully. I spent mine in 6 months, then came to you for help with a temporary cash flow problem. And you helped. You always helped. Until you didn't. Until I couldn't. I corrected him. There's a difference. He nodded slowly. I'm beginning to understand that. I'm also beginning to understand what it's cost you, not just the money, but the opportunities, the security, the life you might have built. I said nothing, letting his words settle between us like stones in still water. I can't pay you back, he said finally. Not all of it, probably not even most of it, but I want you to know that I recognize the debt, both financial and moral, and I'm going to do what I can to make amends. What does that mean? I asked, wary of promises that had been made and broken countless times before. It means I'm selling the house, he said. Claire and I both know we can't afford it on our separate incomes. We're going to split the equity and go our separate ways. I'll be getting about $60,000 after the mortgage is paid off. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. This is a promissory note for $50,000 from my share of the house sale. It's legally binding. Matthew helped me draft it. The house closes next month. I took the envelope, but didn't open it. Andraw, I know it's not everything, he interrupted. It's not even close, but it's what I can do right now. Matthew says he's going to continue his payments too. Between us, we might eventually make a dent in what we owe you. This isn't necessary, I said, though part of me recognized that it absolutely was not just for my financial recovery, but for Andrew's moral one. It is necessary, he insisted. For me, if not for you. I need to do this, James. I need to start taking responsibility for the damage I've caused. Financially to you, emotionally to Matthew, in every way to my marriage. I can't fix everything, but I can start somewhere. I studied my brother's face, looking for signs of the manipulation that had characterized our relationship for decades. What I saw instead was something unfamiliar, genuine remorse, a haunted recognition of his own failings, a determination to begin making amends. What will you do after the house is sold? I asked. Get an apartment, something modest within my actual means. Focus on my relationship with Matthew, which has been strained since he took your side in all this. Try to rebuild my life on a more honest foundation. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of decades of financial entanglement and recent months of bitter estrangement hanging between us. I miss you, Andrew said finally. I miss my brother. Not the ATM, not the safety net, but my actual brother. The guy who taught me to ride a bike in this very park, who helped me with my math homework even when I was being a pain about it, who stood up for me when those kids from Oakwood were giving me a hard time. I've missed you too, I admitted. Even while I was angry, even while I was finally standing up for myself, I miss my brother. Do you think, he hesitated, do you think we could start over? Not financially, I understand those boundaries are permanent and necessary. But as brothers, I considered his question, weighing the decades of exploitation against the possibility of a relationship rebuilt on healthier terms. Not start over, I said finally. We can't erase the past, Andrew, but we can move forward differently, with clear boundaries, with mutual respect, with an understanding that loving someone doesn't mean enabling their worst instincts. He nodded, accepting these terms. I'd like that, to move forward differently. As we parted ways that afternoon, I felt a cautious optimism I hadn't expected. Andrew's divorce was a painful consequence of the financial reality they'd been avoiding for decades, but perhaps it was also an opportunity for him to build a more authentic life, for us to establish a healthier relationship, for our family to heal the wounds that money had inflicted. The promissory note he'd given me wouldn't solve my retirement crisis single-handedly, but combined with my aggressive saving plan, Matthew's contributions, and my additional consulting work, it moved the needle from desperate toward challenging but possible. More importantly, it represented something I'd never thought to see from my brother: accountability, recognition of the harm he'd caused, a genuine desire to make amends, however partial and belated. As I walked back to my office, I realized that the past 9 months had brought a different kind of wealth, not financial security, which was still a distant goal, but a richness of self-respect, of boundaries honored, of relationships based on truth rather than exploitation. For 26 years, I had paid a steep price for my loyalty to my brother and his family. The cost had been nearly $400,000 and a secure retirement. But in finally saying no, in demanding respect rather than assuming the role of financial savior, I had gained something perhaps even more valuable: the chance to rebuild my life on my own terms, with people who valued me for more than my checkbook. It wasn't the future I'd planned, but it was a future I was creating intentionally, with clear eyes and firm boundaries. And for the first time in decades, it was truly mine. 1 year to the day after I'd told Andrew I couldn't help with Matthew's Cornell tuition, I sat in my financial advisor's office reviewing my progress. "You've made remarkable strides, Mr. Mercer," she said, looking over my updated financial statements. "Your retirement account has grown from $6,800 to just over $75,000 in 12 months. That's exceptional progress." I nodded, knowing the components that had made it possible: my aggressive saving from my regular salary, the weekend consulting work that had become a steady source of additional income, the $50,000 payment from Andrew after his house sold, Matthew's continued monthly contributions, which now totaled nearly $10,000. "It's still not where it should be for someone my age," I said realistically. "No," she agreed, "but the trajectory has changed dramatically. If you can maintain this level of contribution for another 5 years, then continue steady contributions until age 70, you should be able to retire with a modest but secure income. Not luxury, but comfort." Comfort. A year ago, that word had seemed an impossible dream. Now it was a realistic goal, still requiring sacrifice and diligence, but achievable. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes," I told her, the same words I'd spoken a year earlier but now backed by a track record of consistent action. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Matthew. "Got the official transfer acceptance to Cornell for fall semester. Full scholarship plus housing stipend. No loans needed. Celebration dinner this weekend. My treat." I smiled, typing back, "Absolutely. Incredibly proud of you." My nephew had spent his gap year not just working and saving money, but excelling academically at community college, building a portfolio of coding projects, and securing recommendations that had transformed his college prospects. The full scholarship to Cornell represented not just financial assistance but recognition of his talents and work ethic. Andrew had texted earlier in the week as well, a brief update on his new life: smaller apartment, focus on building his real estate business, regular therapy sessions to address the spending habits and entitlement that had contributed to his financial irresponsibility. We were rebuilding our relationship slowly, with clear boundaries and occasional shared meals that felt less strained with each passing month. Claire remained distant, still bitter about the divorce and the financial adjustments it had necessitated. Some relationships, I was learning, couldn't be salvaged once the enabling patterns were broken. That was a painful reality, but one I was coming to accept. My mother, who had initially struggled to understand my financial boundaries, had gradually become my ally in maintaining them. "I never realized how much we all leaned on you," she'd admitted during a recent visit. "How much we took for granted that you would handle everything, fix everything, fund everything. I'm sorry, James. You deserved better from all of us." That acknowledgement, more than any repayment plan or promissory note, had helped heal some of the deepest wounds of the past year. As I walked through the park near my office, the same park where Andrew and I had met to discuss his divorce months earlier, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. From financial exploitation to boundaries to healing. From silent resentment to honest confrontation to cautious rebuilding. The price of loyalty had been steep, nearly $400,000 and decades of deferred dreams. But the cost of continuing that loyalty would have been even higher: a retirement spent in poverty, a life defined by resentment, relationships built on exploitation rather than respect. In saying no to Andrew, in finally prioritizing my own financial security, I had paid a different kind of price: family conflict, emotional manipulation, temporary estrangement. But that price had purchased something invaluable: the chance to rebuild my life on a foundation of self-respect and clear boundaries. My retirement account was still smaller than it should have been for a man approaching 60. My apartment was still modest, my lifestyle still frugal. But for the first time in decades, my financial future was my own, not mortgaged to someone else's expectations, not sacrificed on the altar of misplaced loyalty. And that, I was discovering, was a form of wealth that no balance sheet could fully capture. As I reached the center of the park, I paused by the bench where Andrew and I had sat during our conversation about his divorce. A young father was there now, watching his children on the same swings where we had played as boys, where I had pushed Matthew when he was small. The cycle continued, generations rising and falling, each making choices about what they valued, what they would sacrifice, what price they were willing to pay for their definitions of loyalty and love. I hoped Matthew would make wiser choices than his father had, than I had for too many years. The evidence suggested he would. His financial responsibility, his work ethic, his commitment to making amends for debts he hadn't personally incurred but had benefited from. Perhaps that was the real legacy of my belated financial awakening, not just the retirement security I was slowly rebuilding for myself, but the lesson in boundaries and responsibility that might echo through future generations of our family. As I continued my walk back to the office, I felt lighter than I had in years, unburdened by the weight of financial obligation that had shaped nearly 3 decades of my adult life. The path ahead was still challenging. Rebuilding at 59 what should have been established decades earlier always would be. But it was my path now, chosen with clear eyes and firm boundaries, and that made all the difference.